welcome to the video. And what am I here today to do? Well, it's a first for the channel. I'm going to be taking apart a Nintendo Game Boy. Now, the Nintendo Game Boy is something that I have very fond memories of indeed. Very, very fond memories. One of the first gaming consoles I ever owned back when I was a kid. Probably before a lot of you were even born that are watching this. You might not remember the dot matrix greatness of playing Tetris, whether solo or linking up with a friend to play two-player Tetris. Great fun. Used to love doing that at lunchtime at school, just sitting there with two Game Boys linked up, playing against each other, trying to find out who was the best at putting blocks into positions and scoring points. Weird times. But anyway, why am I doing this? Well, I haven't had a Game Boy for a long time, but I had a birthday recently, and on Twitter I replied to Extreme Rates, friends of the TootXB channel. They had someone who had done something with a Game Boy, and I commented saying how I'd love to have an old Game Boy. I'd love to have another Game Boy to be able to play Tetris on. So as a surprise, Mrs. Toot, for my birthday, bought me a Game Boy. Now, she got it for secondhand from eBay. You can't get them brand new anymore, obviously, because they're really old, from back in 80s or 90s, late 80s, I guess. I guess the late 80s. How old would I have been? Late 80s, early 90s, one or the other. Doesn't really matter. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the bottom of the screen so you can see it. So, as a surprise, she managed to get me one for my birthday, and she got it from eBay secondhand. So obviously, it's not in the greatest of condition. It works perfectly well. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. But in terms of a unit, it's a bit scuffed, a bit dirty, not as clean as you might like it to be if you're like me and like brand new equipment. So what I thought I would do, and what Mrs. Toot thought I would like to do as well, is to modify it. I've been modifying controllers and doing lots of stuff with hardware lately. She thought I might like to have a go at modifying this. At the end of the day, if I break it, it's not a huge loss to me because I didn't have one before. It's not something I'll use all the time. I've got a Switch, I've got an Xbox, it's expendable, but we can obviously just buy another one off eBay if I really want to, if I do break it. So what I thought I would do is I would change the case, the whole case. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the case black. I've bought this black case here that you can see. This is the back of it, and we've got the front of it as well. And I'm going to change all of the buttons and everything, and I'm going to make them orange. I've already attached the plastic screen, or the plastic casing for the front, of which the screen will obviously sit behind. So once I take the old Game Boy apart, I will, give the internals a bit of a clean out, give the screen a dust, and then attach this new case. And also, I've got some nice orange buttons here, all sorts of buttons, a D-pad and everything, with two little tri-headed screwdrivers and a load of spare screws that come with the kit as well. So I'm looking forward to doing this. It might go wrong, it might not. It doesn't look too hard, I've looked it up. So anyway, if you want to see how to modify a Game Boy and change the case, then this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it apart, I'm going to put it back together in the new case, show you how to do it, and hopefully I don't break anything. So let's get right into it. The first thing we want to do is take out the game cartridge, take off the rear cover, take out the batteries, as you can see here. Then there are just 6 screws that we need to take out the back in order to take the case apart. It's very, very simple. Now, depending on which model of Game Boy you've got, they'll either be Phillips screws, which is what I've got here. I've got Phillips screws on mine because it's an early Game Boy, but some of the later Game Boys, as I understand it, have tri-screws. Now, you can buy special screwdrivers to take those out, but if you're lucky enough to have the Phillips screwdriver version of the Game Boy, then most of us have just got a Phillips screwdriver lying around, and you can just pick one up and just take these screws out. So first, remove all 6 of these screws in order to separate the front and the back. Now, with those screws taken out, we just very carefully separate the front from the rear. Now, as you'll notice, there's a data cable connecting these two sides together. This is what connects the front circuit board and the screen up to the back circuit board, which is where you plug the game in. So what you want to do is very, very carefully remove this ribbon cable from the rear of the case. Now, there's nothing that snaps it into place. You can just pull it off. But I would advise just to be very, very cautious. It will just pull out. It is quite firm, but just give it a gentle tug, making sure you don't bend anything, because you don't want to break it if you can avoid it. Now, as we take these two apart, We want to work on one side at a time. We're going to start by working on the back, which is on the left hand side of the screen. Now all of the screws that screw into the front and the back and also holding the case together are actually the same size screw pretty much. The ones holding the case together are slightly longer than the ones holding the circuit boards in place, but they're pretty interchangeable. But still try to keep the screws separate. Keep all the back ones in one place, all of the front ones in one place, and all of the screws that are holding the Game Boy together in a separate place, and you can't go far wrong. So we take out the screws from the main circuit board on the back first, and then we remove the screws from the audio unit down at the bottom here, which is where you plug in the 3.5mm headset. So with the 4 screws taken out of the rear, that means it is now time to take out the circuit board and the small audio unit that the headphones plug into. So the headphone unit will just pull right off. Just pull that circuit board off. Get our 2 cases side by side. We've got the original and we've got the new case that we're going to replace it with, and we can see that on the rear of the original unit there is still 2 metal plates that are screwed in place. So we're going to unscrew these 2 plates using our Phillips head screwdriver again, and we'll keep these screws separate. These are a slightly different size. These are slightly smaller than the rest of the screws, so we'll keep those separate, and then we will transfer this rear metal plate over to the new unit, and then that allows us to remove that whole backing plate. As you can see, it just comes away. Now we'll put the new power button in place just so you can have an idea of where it goes. You don't actually put it in just yet, but I've put it in there just for the look, and that's where the metal plate from the rear unit will go. Before we do anything else, we'll just screw that into place and we'll get that process going. So all 4 screws go back in. At this point we will take the battery cover off, and this is where we'll replace the battery connection points. Now they're held in with a very small little lip there where you just push that in with a screwdriver to allow you to pop that out. And there we go, the battery connector will just pull out and then you can just slot it into the new case. Nice and easy. And then we have to do that with the other 2 battery connection points. Now with that done, we can start to replace the circuit board in the rear. So we simply slot the circuit board onto those pillars in the new case. We put the audio unit into position, and then we just replace the 4 screws that we took out. And that's the rear done. And that's how simple it is to actually do this. The front isn't going to be much harder than this, that's for sure. It's just more screws. That's all it is. So there we go. All of that is now screwed back into place. The power button though, what I didn't know when I first did it is that you don't just push it in there like that. So what I had to do is actually unscrew it, pull the circuit board away slightly, and then just reposition the power button, because the power button actually connects onto the circuit board and doesn't just sit in the case. So lesson learned while I was doing that. Learn from my mistakes. Learn from my mistakes. So once that's back in, we just re-screw the circuit board back into place, and then that's us ready to go with the rear. Now what we will do is move on to the front of the Game Boy case, and this is just a simple 10 screws to remove, which are highlighted on the screen. So let's just unscrew all of those quickly. Now it takes a little bit of pulling, but that front circuit board with the screen attached will just come out with that speaker there all as one piece. As we take it out, we can see there the rubber backings. We need to make sure we keep these rubber backs. So we've got the rubber back for the A, B buttons. We've got the rubber back there for the D-pad, and we've got the rubber select and start buttons, which we're not going to use. We're actually going to replace those select and start buttons, but we do still need the rubber backings or the silicone backings for the D-pad and the A and B button. Now, before we put the screen and circuit board into the new case, we're going to give it a clean. It's an old Game Boy, so we're just going to give it a clean up to make sure that it's as dust free as possible and looking as pretty as it can do when it goes into the new front case. Now later on I'm thinking I might actually do a backlight mod to this. I'm a little bit nervous to do that, so at the moment I'm just going to replace the case rather than do anything funky like install a new backlight. So let's give the rear of this new screen cover a bit of a wipe as well, just to make sure that's as clean as it can be. before we put this back together. Now we put the new D-pad in, we'll put the new A and B buttons back in, and we'll put the new select and start buttons back in. That will only go one way. It's got a little hole there at the top, as you can see, and that just sits there nicely on the front. Now before we put the circuit board back into place, we also need to replace the rubber or the silicone backings to those buttons. So we take that from the original unit and we just pop those into place on here, and that will form the connection between the buttons and the circuit board so that when you press it, it's nice and soft and also actually touches the contact and does what it's supposed to do. Then all we need to do is put the front circuit board back in, put the audio unit or the speaker back in first, put the circuit board just on top, and then we put those 10 screws back into place to hold the circuit board to the front of the Game Boy. With that done, we turn it over, just make sure that everything is good, everything looks fine. Now we need to reconnect the ribbon cable from the front of the Game Boy onto the back of the Game Boy. Now it's not easy, again, you still need to be careful here, but it is quite firm. You just have to get them close enough together, angle the ribbon cable slightly and just push it back into place as firmly as you can. And there we go, that's it in, and we can then put the front of the Game Boy back onto the back of the Game Boy. Just make sure it's all pushed together. Make sure the batteries go in and that we can turn it on. There we go, we get a little bit of power. So let's take those batteries out and then just make sure we screw everything back in. So we take those original 6 screws and then we can just screw the case back together. And that's pretty much the Game Boy case switched around now. Now with the batteries back in, we can replace the cover, put Tetris back in. We'll take the protective dust sheet off at the front of the screen. There's a second little protective cover on there as well. I'm going to take that off, I don't want that in there. And there we go, that is our effectively brand new looking Game Boy. So as we turn the Game Boy over with Tetris and the batteries plugged back in, we will just turn the unit on, make sure it all fires up and that everything is working exactly as we expect it to. There comes the Nintendo on the screen, looking exactly like it's supposed to, and there is the game starting up. There's Tetris, and as you can see, it plays as you would expect it to. So a successful job there. Considering that's my first time, went a lot smoother than I expected. A lot smoother. And I've got to say, I'm really happy with this black case and the orange buttons. I kind of wish I'd gone with an all black or black and grey for the real stealth look on the Game Boy, but this is fairly individual and fairly unique. I like the bright colours, so I'm happy with this. I am happy with this. And for a cost of £20 for all of these parts and the screws and the screwdrivers, which I actually didn't need because I didn't realise that I had the right screwdrivers to open this up. £20 including delivery, that's not too bad. It's pretty much a new Game Boy for 20 quid. I mean, you have to buy the internals first or buy the original Game Boy first, but if you've got an old Game Boy, you're going to make it look nice and new, then £20 isn't a lot to really switch all these parts up and make it nice and fresh and unique and customize it to be something a little bit more to your tastes. So that was me freshening up my Game Boy. If you'd like to do the same, there's all sorts of places on the internet that you can buy this stuff, but I bought mine from a company called deadpanrobot.com. I'll put the links in the description and also into the pinned comment. So if you'd like to get some parts for yourself, check them out, see what they do, and see if there's some things there that tickle your fancy. Like I say, one day I'd like to go down the route of doing a backlight mod, but it's a bit more advanced than I'm ready for at the moment, I think. At the moment, I'm happy with this. I can keep playing Tetris and Super Mario World, the 2 games that Mrs. Toot bought me to go with this. And if I decide that this is something that's really worth it for me, then I'll look at doing the backlight mod, or even maybe just something to do for a video for you guys, because I enjoy doing this stuff. So hopefully you've liked this video. If you have, then please remember to like and subscribe, get your notifications so that you don't miss out on anything. It all helps to get my videos spotted in the algorithms and allows me to keep on making them. So please remember to like, subscribe and get your notifications. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back here for some more videos in the future.